I'm Nishita Sinha from the United States of America, and this is my submission for the 2017 Davidson Fellowship. So my project is called Experimental Studies in Developing Safe Sanitation Solutions. My story started about 7 years ago, when I was 10 years old. Every year, my family takes a trip to our ancestral village in northern India. And this year, on this trip, I witnessed something kind of strange. I saw groups of women essentially traveling out far in the fields to defecate in the open. As a kid, this struck me as shocking. I didn't know what this practice was and why it was necessary. When I came home, I did some research and realized that this type of open defecation is not restricted to this one village in India. No, this is a problem that affects more than 2.4 billion people worldwide. This concerned me because open defecation is really dangerous. It's inconvenient and can also lead to the spread of harmful diseases like hepatitis A, diarrhea, dysentery, and cholera. It can also result in groundwater contamination. At this point, I was curious. In my house, I have a flush toilet so readily available to use. Why can't we just install flush toilets or septic tank systems in these villages? Turns out these are infeasible due to the lack of space, funding, and drainage systems. So I knew I had to help by looking for some other toilet solution. I reached out to about 20 different toilet companies and tried to see if there was any practical toilet solution that I could install in these villages. But every system that I looked at was either too expensive or too big or just too impractical. Eventually, I found the way forward through the Sulab International 2-pit composting toilet. This toilet was very inexpensive and compact, making it very practical for in-village installation. It works using an innovative underground 2-pit approach. In these 2 underground pits, solid waste is stored and effectively converted into safe, usable fertilizer. However, liquid waste actually seeps out of these underground pits into surrounding soil and potentially groundwater sources. Sulab International employs a 15-centimeter thick layer of sand surrounding these pits almost like a jacket, meant to filter remnant pathogens out of liquid waste before it passes into soil and potentially groundwater sources. The thing is, I didn't think that this 15-centimeter thick layer was enough. I thought that this liquid waste was still leaving these toilets ripe with many pathogens, and if my hunch was correct, this means that as many toilets are installed in villages, it could result in widespread groundwater contamination. So I started looking at ways that I could improve liquid waste filtration. I researched many different filters, but every filter I researched was so expensive or high-tech. It seemed very infeasible for installation in these villages. Through my research, I found out that many natural materials like pebbles or antimicrobials like coconut oil, garlic paste, or turmeric have filtering or antimicrobial properties. I thought that perhaps I could use some combination of these natural and easily available materials to improve upon liquid waste filtration and make it safe to limit groundwater contamination. So the goal of my project became twofold. One, to check out these sand filters and to determine how effective they were in removing pathogens from liquid waste. And to 2, see if I could improve liquid waste filtration given both economic and space constraints. So I started researching different combinations of natural materials that I could add to sand filter layers to improve filtration. I came up with a set of different filter ideas that could potentially help improve liquid waste filtration. The question was, how was I going to measure the efficacy of these different filters? To do this, I constructed these plug flow reactors out of PVC tubing, which is both durable and easy to clean. I constructed 2 reactors to make side-by-side comparisons easy. So I'd fill one with my control filtering material, which would be the sand, and I'd fill the other with whatever new updated filter I was testing. I also needed to simulate human waste. To represent feces, I used mashed potatoes because it matches the viscosity of human feces very well. For urine, I used saline solution. And for fecal coliform bacteria, I used a non-pathogenic strain of E. coli. So essentially, I would fill each plug flow reactor with whatever filtered material I'm currently testing, so it'd be sand or sand mixed with some antimicrobial substance, and then I'd run samples of the simulated human waste through these plug flow reactors. I would run them through the top and then collect samples from the bottom. By measuring the bacteria concentration of the influent sample and comparing that to the effluent sample, I could get a good idea of how well my different filtering materials worked. Using this approach, I was able to create the optimal filter. Using this lab methodology that I developed, I set out to find the optimal filter. In the first phase of my research, I focused on 1, showing that Sulab International filters were ineffective scientifically, and 2, developing a simple filter that could be used to improve this. So to do this, I tested a sand filter and sand pebble filter. So this was sand filters mixed with pebbles in them. And I was able to show that in fact the sand filter used by Solib International is ineffective at removing pathogens from liquid waste. And I was also able to show that just by adding pebbles to the sand in a 1 to 1.5 ratio, I was able to improve filtration by a staggering 83%. This was encouraging because just a simple material like pebbles are able to have so much impact on filtration. After this first phase, I thought, why stop here? There's so much more that we can do. So in the second phase of my work, I looked into using different natural antimicrobials. These are substances that don't simply just filter materials, but are actually able to actively kill pathogens. So I soon realized an issue, though. I was originally using liquid antimicrobials like coconut oil and garlic paste. The problem was these substances tended to sink to the bottom of my filtering layer, which led to a very short-lived solution. To combat this, I came up with what's known as slow-release antimicrobial additives. These include solid objects like turmeric or mustard seeds, some of which have their own antimicrobial properties and others can be pre-soaked in antimicrobial oils. Essentially, when placed in the geometric configuration of the filter, they slowly release their inner antimicrobial substances, leading to a long-lived solution. So far, these slow-release antimicrobial additives seem very promising, and I'm currently working on getting these into my filter solution. This solution was so encouraging. It was consistently 80 or 90% more effective than existing Solib sand filters. This has such a great success rate. But while the solution may be extremely successful in the short term, I wanted a filter that was long-lasting. I wanted a filter that required minimal maintenance, was able to unclog itself, and was overall sustainable. To get this, I turned to electricity. High-voltage electricity can kill almost any microbe, but it's expensive and dangerous. Instead, I looked at using low-voltage electricity. I found evidence that suggested using low-voltage time-varying electric fields could perhaps temporarily weaken micromembranes. I thought that perhaps I could add low-voltage time-varying electric fields into my filter to improve filtration. But to get these low-voltage electric fields into my filter, I needed to come up with a circuit that was durable, robust, inexpensive, and practical for deployment in the village. So let me give you some more detail about the circuits that I created to deploy this low-voltage time-varying electric field in the filter. To do this, I created these circuits, which uses a capacitor that charges through an RC circuit configuration and discharges through a secondary avalanche mode of an NPN transistor. So essentially, after the capacitor charges and the current crosses some certain threshold, this triggers the secondary avalanche mode of an NPN transistor and causes the capacitor to discharge. This charge-discharge pattern of the capacitor creates the pulsed voltage waveform, which you are seeing on the oscilloscope in front of me. So this was my original circuit design, but I want to make this even better. I want to make the peak-to-peak voltage of these oscillations and also the frequency of these oscillations flexible. To do this, I augmented my initial circuit with a new amplification stage. This amplification stage uses another capacitor that charges through an RC configuration and discharges through an NPN transistor. This secondary stage is connected to the first stage using a Zener diode. So essentially, once the first stage voltage reaches some certain threshold, it triggers the Zener diode, which then leads to the discharge of the secondary capacitor and creates another voltage waveform, but this time with a higher peak-to-peak voltage. So this circuit, all powered by a 12-volt solar panel, is robust, inexpensive, and practical for deployment in the villages. So how are we actually going to deploy this time-varying electric field into our filters? To do this, we came up with this scheme of using two wire meshes. We connect these wire meshes to the top and the bottom of the filtering layer, and then connect these nodes of the electric field to both the wire meshes, so one at the top and one at the bottom of the filter. And this is actually what can be used in the real-life Solib International toilet pits, by connecting mesh screens to in the center of the pit and then towards the outside of the pit as well. So using this configuration, we were able to deploy low-voltage time-varying electric fields into our filter body. And when we ran trials with sand pebble filters augmented with low-voltage time-varying electric fields, the results were amazing. In the short term, these time-varying electric fields were able to improve filtration again by around 90%. But what was more astonishing was the long-term improvement. In the long term, these time-varying electric fields brought the bacteria count coming out of these filters to around 0 colonies. This is amazing because this means that in the long term, these time-varying electric fields augmented filters serve as an almost 100% success rate filters. By updating Solib International toilets with our created liquid waste filtration technology, we have been able to create a toilet that is practical and, in my opinion, quite successful for deployment. This toilet has already been installed. Working with nonprofits, local governments, and Solop International itself, I have facilitated the installation of 125 toilets so far in northern Indian villages, many of which have updated liquid waste filtration technology. The great thing about these toilets is that they are very versatile. We designed them so that we can just update a few different materials and apply them to many different regions, including Africa, South America, and Bangladesh. And the next step is global deployment. So far, I've been lucky to have been accepted to many great universities, including MIT, Caltech, and Stanford. And I really hope to use my education to continue this research. I really hope I gain the support of the Davidson Foundation to bring this project to the next level. Together, we can really end the problem of unsafe human waste management in the entire world. Thank you.